How many times have you expected to feel motivated to start something important? Maybe you promised that you would start your project when the inspiration came, that you would change habits when the energy appeared, or that you would take that great step when you felt ready. And without realizing it, the days became weeks, the weeks in months, and the months in years. Brian Tracy teaches that this is one of the most common mistakes that sabotage the lives of millions of people. Wait for the motivation to act. The truth is hard, but liberating. Motivation does not come before action, but after it. Our mind is programmed to protect us from effort and change. That is why it invents excuses, postpones decisions, and convinces us that tomorrow will be better time. But the reality is that there is no perfect tomorrow. Life only transforms when you learn to move even without desire. When you decide that your discipline is stronger than your momentary emotions. That is the secret of the great winners. They do not expect to feel ready, they simply act. And when acting, they wake up the energy and motivation they were waiting for. Imagine how many opportunities are lost because someone decided to sit down until desire appeared. Now think otherwise. In people who, without initial motivation, took the first step and discovered that with each action their trust grew. That is the true cycle. Action generates results. The results generate trust. And trust feeds motivation. If you understand this, your life will never be the same again. In this guide, you will discover how to stop depending on motivation and start building real discipline. You will learn why action always precedes inspiration, how to hack your mind to move even in the most difficult days, and how to install habits that will keep you moving even if the will is not on your side. Because the truth is this, if you expect motivation, you can wait for a lifetime. But if you decide to act, even with small steps, you will begin to create the life you have always wanted. The first principle you must understand to stop depending on the motivation is that the action precedes emotion. Most people believe otherwise, that they must first feel enthusiasm, energy, or desire, and only then will be ready to act. But Brian Tracy insists that the real sequence is different. The action comes first, and emotion, motivation, comes later as a natural consequence of moving. Waiting to feel motivated before starting is like waiting for firewood to turn it on before turning it on. It simply doesn't work. When you decide to take a step, even if it is small, something comes on inside. That spark is the sign that your brain begins to release energy, to generate positive chemistry, to produce dopamine by the simple fact of moving forward. You do not need to run a marathon. You do not need to finish the complete project. It is enough to start, to break the inertia. It is that initial action that awakens motivation, and not vice versa. Who understands this ceases to be caught in the vicious circle of postponement and begins to live in the virtuous circle of discipline. Think how many times you delayed something important because you weren't looking forward to. Maybe it was going to the gym, writing a page of that book, organizing your workspace, or making that difficult call. Waiting only extended the discomfort. But when you finally did, what happened? You discovered that it was not so complicated. The discomfort lasted only a few minutes, and then you felt relief, trust, and even satisfaction. That is the power to act before feeling. Every time you experience it, you confirm that motivation is not the cause of movement, but its effect. This principle radically changes your relationship with discipline. You no longer have to depend on feeling inspired every day, because you know that inspiration is built in the process. The question is no longer, I feel like, and he becomes, am I willing to take a step right now? That little change of mentality is what separates those who advance from those who stagnate. While some wait for the wind to blow in favor, others learn to row even against the current. And in that effort, they discover that they have more strength than they believed. The greatest enemy of this principle is inertia. When you spend too long without acting, the mind gets used to comfort and begins to invent increasingly sophisticated excuses. It convinces you that it is not the time, that tomorrow will be easier, that you need motivation to start. But all this is a trap. The only way to break the inertia is with an initial movement. It is like pushing a rock uphill. At first, it requires a lot of energy, but once it starts to roll, the gravity, motivation, does the rest. A practical exercise recommended by Brian Tracy is the 5-minute rule. When you don't feel like doing something, commit yourself to do it only for 5 minutes. Write for 5 minutes, order for 5 minutes, exercise for 5 minutes. What happens almost always is that once you start, the impulse seizes you, and you end up doing much more than you imagined. Not because suddenly you have received a magical motivation injection, but because the initial action aroused the energy you were waiting for. Another crucial aspect is to understand that emotions based on emotions is unstable. If you depend only on feeling inspired, your progress will be like a roller coaster. Some days you will advance, others will do nothing. But if you understand that the action does not depend on your emotions, but on your decision, then your life becomes predictable. You are no longer at the mercy of the mood of the day, but of your commitment with yourself. That is the basis of self-discipline. Act independent of how you feel at the time. This principle also reveals a powerful truth. Trust is not built thinking, it is built acting. Many people expect to feel safe before taking a step, but security comes later when you check with facts that you are capable. Each action, however small, reinforces your identity of someone who complies, who advances, does not stop. That identity, repeated day after day, becomes your greatest source of long-term motivation. Imagine how your life would change if you would internalize once and for all that you don't need to move, that it is enough to take the first step, even if it is tiny, so that all the gear begins to turn. That every time you choose to act, you are training your mind to obey your will instead of obeying your emotions. That is the true power of this principle, recovering control of your life, step by step, action after action, until discipline becomes your new nature. The second fundamental principle to stop waiting for motivation and start acting is to understand that discipline always expires to momentary emotion. Brian Tracy constantly repeats that most people fail not because they lack talent, intelligence, or even resources, but because they let themselves be dragged by the whims of their emotions. Today they feel like tomorrow. Today they have enthusiasm, tomorrow they feel apathy. They live as passengers of a train that they never lead, at the mercy of what their mood dictates. But those who really advance are those who understand that emotions change, while discipline remains. Discipline does not depend on how you feel, it depends on who you decide to be. A disciplined person knows that complying with what he promised himself is more important than the comfort of the moment. That is why he gets up early, even if he does not feel. He works on his project, even if the enthusiasm is low, or remains faithful to his health routine, even when he would prefer to surrender to laziness. Each act of discipline is a message that sends him to his mind. I control my life, not my passing emotions. That coherence is the one that builds trust and, finally, success. This principle connects with something Brian Tracy calls the price of freedom. True freedom is not doing what you want at all times, but having the ability to direct your life towards what really matters. And that capacity is only achieved when your discipline is stronger than your immediate desires. People who wait to feel motivated are like leaves moved by the wind. They go in the direction that blow their emotions. But disciplined people are like trees with deep roots. They can face storms because they are anchored in their decisions. One of the great traps of the mind is to confuse comfort with happiness. Many times we choose the easiest in the short term, see television instead of reading, sleeping more instead of exercising, spending instead of saving, because it gives us immediate pleasure. But that pleasure is fleeting and is almost always accompanied by guilt, frustration, or stagnation. Discipline, on the other hand, demands discomfort in the present but gives satisfaction in the future. And it is that deep satisfaction, the result of sustained effort, which becomes true motivation. This is where the power of the habit appears. When you repeat an action with discipline for enough time, it ceases to be an internal battle and becomes part of your identity. You no longer need to negotiate with yourself every morning if you are going to work on your goals. You simply do it, as who breathes or walks. Brian Tracy explains that self-discipline is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. At first, it can hurt, but over time, that force becomes your greatest advantage. But discipline is not rigid. It does not mean living without joy. On the contrary, well-understood discipline gives you more space to enjoy because it organizes your life around what really matters. An undisciplined person is constantly turning off fires, running behind time, and trapped in a cycle of guilt. A disciplined person lives with structure, and that structure releases energy to create, enjoy, and grow. Therefore, discipline does not kill motivation. It generates it because it eliminates chaos and replaces uncertainty by clarity. Another key aspect is the power of self-image. Every time you choose the discipline on comfort, you reinforce the idea that you are someone reliable, someone who fulfills what it promises. That positive self-image becomes a source of pride and energy. On the other hand, every time you choose comfort on discipline, you reinforce the belief that you cannot trust yourself, and that is one of the deepest causes of the lack of motivation. True self-esteem is born from discipline, knowing that you can tell yourself. This principle also protects you from self-deception. Many people say, "I'm going to wait for the perfect moment," or "when I feel with more energy, I will start." But that moment rarely comes. Self-deception is the mechanism of defense of a mind that seeks to avoid effort. The discipline breaks that cycle because it does not negotiate with comfort. Do not wait for the ideal day. It does not depend on the external conditions being aligned. Act here and now with what you have where it is. And in that repeated act, the magic of the transformation is constructed. Imagine how your life would change if you made your standard discipline, not your exception. If every day, regardless of your mood, take at least one step towards your goals. No giant steps, not impossible feats, but consistent actions that accumulate results over time. That is the true strength of this principle. Not to live at the mercy of changing emotions, but to direct your life with firm decisions. In short, discipline is the bridge that connects your dreams with your reality. While you are still waiting to feel motivated, you will continue to wait. But when you decide that your word is worth more than your momentary emotions, you discover that you do not need motivation to move forward. You discover that disciplined action, repeated day after day, becomes the most powerful force of your life. The third essential principle to stop waiting for motivation and start acting is to understand that small steps create great transformations. Brian Tracy says that most people are paralyzed because they look at the complete goal and feel overwhelmed. They want immediate results, radical changes, gigantic victories. But life doesn't work that way. No tree grows in one day, no empire is built in a week, no real transformation occurs overnight. True progress is made of small steps, repeated with constancy until they become an unstoppable current. When you expect motivation, what you are really waiting for is to feel able to face the entire mountain at once. And as that feeling never comes, you postpone. But if instead of focusing on the top, you decide to concentrate on the next step, everything changes. The next step is manageable, attainable, concrete. And the fascinating thing is that once you take that step, energy begins to multiply. Your mind stops seeing the mountain as an impossible monster and begins to see it as a series of steps that you can overcome one by one. This principle also destroys the most common excuse, "I don't have time." The truth is that you do not need huge blocks of hours to advance. You need consistency. Reading 10 pages a day is more transformative than reading 100 once a month. Saving a small percentage of your income constantly builds more wealth than doing it once in an impulsive way. Exercising 20 minutes daily generates more results than waiting for 2 hours that never arrive. Greatness is not in the extraordinary that you do from time to time, but in the ordinary that you do every day with discipline. The power of the small steps is also that they generate impulse. Brian Tracy explains that action creates energy, and energy attracts more action. When something small, your brain receives a dose of dopamine, the hormone of satisfaction. That little achievement reinforces your trust, and that trust drives you to do a little more. It's like a snowball. It starts small, but with each lap it grows and gains speed. Thus, transformations are built, not with miraculous jumps, but with constant steps that accumulate until the change becomes inevitable. Another key aspect is that small steps eliminate mental resistance. When you tell yourself, "I'm going to transform my whole life today," your brain feels threatened, panic, and seeks excuses to avoid effort. But when you say, "I'm just going to take a small step now," the resistance disappears. That step, however simple, opens the door for those who follow. The important thing is not the magnitude of the step, but the address. Because a small step in the right direction is infinitely more valuable than being still, waiting for perfect motivation. This principle also highlights the value of patience. We live in an obsessed culture with the immediate. We want instant results, rapid rewards, express success. But things that are really worth time, build a solid career, improve your health, create deep relationships, achieve financial freedom, all this is achieved with constancy over months and years. Patience is not passivity, it is sustained discipline. And every small step you give is an investment in that long-term transformation. The most powerful thing about this principle is that it converts discipline into identity. When you repeat small actions day after day, not only accumulate results, you also change the way you perceive yourself. You are no longer someone who tries, you are someone who does. You are no longer someone who dreams, you are someone who acts. That identity is indestructible because it does not depend on isolated achievements, but on the daily consistency that no one can take you away. Imagine for a moment what would happen if you decided today to take a small step in each important area of your life. A step towards your health, a step towards your personal project, a step towards your mental development, a step towards your financial well-being. You don't need to do everything at once. You just need to start. Over time, these steps multiply, create new habits, and habits build a destination. That is the true magic of this principle. It shows you that the future is not transformed into a single heroic act, but into the sum of seemingly small actions that change everything. Thus, stop waiting for motivation means understanding that greatness is not found in what you do occasionally, but in what you do every day, even when you don't feel like it. The small steps are the bridge between your present and your future, between intention and realization, between who you are and what you can become. And the best thing is that this bridge is available to you right now. It is enough to decide to take the next step. The fourth principle that you must install in your mind to stop waiting for motivation and begin to act is to understand that the clarity of purpose is more powerful than any passing emotion. Brian Tracy affirms that the most disciplined people in the world do not depend on the inspiration of the moment because they have such a clear purpose that acts as a compass in everything they do. When you know exactly where you are going and why you do it, you don't need to wait for motivation. The vision itself becomes your inexhaustible source of energy. The lack of clarity is one of the main causes of procrastination. When you don't know what you want or do not have a path to find, your mind disperses, invents excuses, and clings to distractions. The result is that you end up trapped in trivial activities that give you the illusion of productivity but do not bring you closer to your goals. Clarity eliminates that noise because your attention focuses on the essential. Each action that Thomas ceases to be an isolated effort and becomes a specific step towards an objective that makes sense for you. Having clarity of purpose means asking you powerful questions. What do I really want to achieve? Why is it important for me? How would my life change if it reached it? These questions not only give you direction, they also arouse a more stable emotional force than momentary motivation: conviction. Motivation can fluctuate, but conviction remains because it is born from your deepest values and the vision of life you want to build. When your purpose is strong, even difficult days acquire meaning. Loading you early ceases to be a sacrifice because you know you are investing in your future. Studying, training, or working harder than others stop feeling as a load and begins to feel as part of your mission. That is the difference between someone who acts for motivation and someone who acts for clarity. One depends on mood, the other depends on the vision.
Brian Tracy teaches that one of the great secrets of success is writing your goals with absolute clarity. It is not enough to say, "I want to be healthier," or "I want to earn more money." You must be specific: how much weight you want to lose, how much money you want to save, what habit you want to build. This specificity transforms a diffuse idea into a specific goal. And what is concrete generates commitment, while the diffuse generates postponement. Clarity also works as an antidote against fear. Many people postpone because they don't know where to start. The lack of a clear plan turns each action into a huge monster. But when you divide your purpose into clear steps, fear is reduced. You know what the next step is, and you just give it. And with each step, the purpose becomes more real, more attainable, more inspiring. This principle also touches a deep aspect of human psychology, the power of identity. When you have clarity about who you are and who you want to be, your actions are automatically aligned with that vision. If you decide that your identity is that of a disciplined person, your actions will reflect that identity, even when you don't feel like it. If you decide that your purpose is to be an example for your family, your discipline becomes an act of love rather than an obligation. The clarity of purpose not only directs your mind, it also transforms your identity. But clarity does not mean rigidity.
Part of the process is to accept that your purpose can evolve over time. The important thing is to have a north defined in the present, an address that allows you to advance and correct along the way. Waiting to have the perfect plan before starting is another form of procrastination disguised. Clarity is not waiting, it is built walking. Every action, every experience helps you refine your vision. Imagine how different your life would be if you will wake up with a clear purpose in mind. You wouldn't need to ask yourself if you feel like it or not. You would simply act because you know that every step makes sense. Your decisions would be easier, your energy would be focused, and your discipline would be more natural. That is what makes clarity. It turns effort into an act of coherence, transforms discipline into a lifestyle, and eliminates the need to depend on motivation. In short, this principle teaches you that motivation is fragile, but the purpose is solid. While you are still waiting to feel motivated, you will depend on a volatile emotion. But when you discover and define your purpose, your life becomes a mission. And a mission does not depend on desire, it depends on commitment. That is the true source of inexhaustible energy that moves people who achieve what most only dream. Throughout this trip, we have discovered a truth that, although simple, has the power to completely transform your life. Motivation is not the cause of action, it is its consequence. If you wait to feel inspired to move, you are likely to wait for a lifetime. But if you decide to act, even without desire, your action will awaken the energy, trust, and impulse you were waiting for so much. This is the principle that separates those who are trapped in the postponement of those who build the success step by step. The first great reminder was that the action precedes emotion. You don't need to feel motivated to start. You need to start to feel motivated. Each small movement breaks inertia and creates a positive cycle where action generates trust and trust feeds motivation. That is the real secret that many do not know. Do not expect to feel ready. Act, and the rest will come. Then we saw that discipline is stronger than any momentary emotion. The motivation is unstable. Today it appears, tomorrow disappears. Discipline, on the other hand, sustains you even in difficult days because it is born from your commitment and not from your mood. Every time you choose discipline on comfort, reinforce your identity of a reliable, capable, and resilient person. And that identity becomes your greatest source of lasting motivation. The third principle taught us that small steps create great transformations. You do not need to conquer the entire mountain in one day. Just take the next step. Greatness is built with constant and simple actions, repeated with patience until they become habits. Those accumulated habits design your destiny. If you learn to value the small and repeat it every day, one day you will wake up and discover that the impossible is already part of your life. Then we understood that the clarity of purpose exceeds any excuse. When you know exactly where you are going and why, you no longer depend on the desire. Your purpose becomes a compass and fuel. Clarity eliminates distractions, reduces fear, and converts each action into a step loaded with meaning. While motivation fluctuates, the purpose remains. That is the force that guides those who do not surrender. These principles form a single powerful truth. You don't need to wait for motivation to come. Motivation is not a requirement, it is a consequence. What you really need is action, discipline, small steps, and a clear purpose. When this becomes your daily mentality, you stop living in waiting and you begin to live in creation. Your life ceases to be a set of excuses and becomes a work built with decision. And now I want to talk to you directly. This message has no value if you stay in beautiful words that you forget tomorrow. It has value if you decide to apply it. Ask yourself, what action can you give today, even if you don't feel like? What step can you take right now to break the inertia and turn on the fire of the discipline? It doesn't matter if it is big or small. The important thing is to do it, because the perfect moment does not exist, but your decision can exist now. If this content resonated with you, if you felt that these words touched an internal fiber and woke up something in you, subscribe to this channel. Here you will find more principles, more tools, and more truths that can help you stop waiting and start living the life you deserve. Share in the comments what impacted you most about this video. Was it the idea that the action comes before emotion? Was it the power of the small steps? Or was it the clarity of purpose as an engine that never goes out? Your reflection will not only reinforce your commitment, it will also inspire others who need to read it to begin their own change. And don't forget to like this video. That little gesture can make this message reach someone else who is trapped waiting for motivation. Maybe thanks to you, that person decides to act, and with that first step, initiate a transformation that changes his life. Always remember, don't wait to feel ready. The action is the beginning. The discipline is the road. The small steps are the bridge, and the purpose is the light. Everything else will come as a consequence. Because life does not change when you feel like, change when you decide to act.